Welcome to the Continuous Delivery Podcast. My name is Zarar.
I'm Cheesy.
I'm Chava.
I'm not even sure this is the Continuous Delivery Podcast anymore because all we talk about is AI. But that's okay. That's okay. So today we've got a bunch of topics ready to go. So we'll start off with, so we'll talk about some ancillary tooling. So things that people have built on top of AIs to make their development workflows better. We'll talk about Cheesy's workflow and the product that he's released called Stride. We'll talk a little bit about does language actually matter in the age of AI? And then we'll talk about whether one product manager can manage 45 teams now that we have AI at our disposal, because Chava finds himself in that position right now. Sort of like spoiler alert, Chava has abandoned sort of coaching and has now gone full into product management. So he has a unique perspective. So we'll dig into that a little bit later on. So let's start with sort of like ancillary tooling. So tools that people have built on top of AI models or AIs to make their development workflow better. Let me explain what I mean by that. So most people kind of go into Claude Code or whatever it is and type in a query and out comes a bunch of code. And then they spend a bunch of time sort of like going back and forth to clean up that code. Maybe the AI made mistakes and so on. So there's been a bunch of tooling around this problem. A couple of examples might be OpenSpec is one, SpecKit is another. I think I'm saying that correctly. And then you have Kiro.dev, which does something else. So here you basically go into sort of planning mode, and the tool sort of helps you with the help of Claude. It's backed by Claude, where you come up with a strong design, a task list, a proposal, and so on, and then you kind of implement it, and the chances of getting that right is much better than if you kind of went raw straight into code. That's sort of been like one of my learnings over the last month as I dive deeper into AI. Cheesy, when I describe this workflow to you of like, spending a little bit of time of planning, then sort of like maybe in half an hour planning and then one-shotting it through the AI to get the feature out, you were like, not my style. So before we move on to your product, Stride,
Mhm.
tell me like why your reaction was like, I don't think I need a tool to sort of plan so much for me before I go into code. So just explain that a little bit.
Well, it wasn't necessarily that I think that planning is bad. I think planning is actually really good. I just think that the tools that you are using for planning don't end up producing the right thing that you might need. And so, I mean, out comes, a nice document and some BDD spec, the whole given when then type thing. And
And a task list.
what's that? And, yeah,
And a task list.
and a task list. Yes. So, first of all, I can tear it apart or critique it in several ways. First of all, the given when then thing is not a great way to communicate anything, in my view.
Did
Okay,
you write a book about this?
I did. I
Saying that
sure
was a
did.
great way to communicate?
A long time ago, I did write a book about this. The thing is that the given when then all came from arrange act assert, right, which was Kit Beck's whole idea around writing good tests. And Dan North and Dave Chilemsky and some others took that and kind of ultimately came up with this language, right? And it was really about how do you specify tests, not how do you communicate, features or tasks or requirements or things like that. And to be quite honest, I don't think that's really great. When I first got started with AI, I also went down the path of create me a plan, a bullet plan, and I would refine it and we try to step through it. But what I found was that ultimately, whenever I actually go to implement it, I'm feeding it one or two lines of text. Okay. And not necessarily the huge amount of details that we worked through at the time when I was producing the plan. And so what I find is that these approaches where the spec driven and all this that people are doing, it's really good. And it's really about making the human feel happy, making the human feel good, bringing in an old, BDD concept or idea. But I don't think that it produces the level of detail that I'm going to need to hand off to an agent or multiple agents or even a different agent than what actually did the planning early on and have it actually executed and feel good that it's going to do what we originally captured early on. So I think there's a huge leap there, and that's where I think it falls short.
Okay, so
And I'll
Chava,
pause.
before I get to you, I just want to say, like, I think I sort of disagree with the part about it not producing a detailed enough task list for an AI to execute. I
Mhm,
think it takes a couple of iterations, but I find myself, I do get there pretty quickly. I
mhm,
have not tried creating it with one agent and executing with another because I just haven't had that case yet.
mhm,
But I totally get it. The BDD is almost like a side effect of the planning,
mhm.
something you might review with your teammates to say, "Hey, are we in agreement that we're going to do this?" Nobody's going to implement the step
Mhm.
tests for them.
No, no,
Don't
I'm
get me
not
wrong.
saying
That
that.
thing is that
But
ship is
even
sailed.
but even communicating it with your team, the given when then is not necessarily the best way to
Okay,
communicate it,
says
right?
the guy who
It
wrote the book
goes
about it.
goes forth.
That's
It's
mighty ironic. So, Chaba, your reaction to that?
Yeah. So I like okay. So when I code, and this is the interesting question. I create these tasks for myself. Like I know what features and what I want to create. I don't feed this to AI. In fact, I try to, or whatever language, I try to go very almost like similar to a TDD style, but in a certain way, just get one feature going, get something going, write a small function, and then keep going, like almost as if I was building myself, so I can keep up. But I keep, of course, where I'm trying to end up. But I kind of, I don't want to say I make up as I go, because I have a very good picture in my head where I want to end up in the end.
Mhm,
But I don't feed this enormous list. I just say, hey, this is my features that I want to build. And I'm a big fan, by the way, is doing a good old style story map or feature map or something, because laying out these and then kind of having this mental model that later on I can kind of go, okay, this feature is there, this feature is there, or even like an MVP or slice it or whichever way.
mhm,
I think this mental modeling, which I use to communicate with my team, to be honest, and not like a given and then, because it could be, to Cheese's point, could be a bit verbose, and I like pictures, me personally, and mental
mhm.
models.
Yeah, I mean,
I
again, I think you guys are over indexing on the given when then part a little bit. I mean, that's
mhm,
just a side effect. I think the goal for me, I think I think this is a good example of how different people use AIs differently with good results in the end. And
mhm,
maybe the lesson here is that, whatever your comfort level is, whatever your approach is, there's no like bad answer here. I think this field is so like nascent and changing fast that it's kind of
mhm,
hard to say that this is the right workflow, right? Maybe
mhm,
that's the agile aspect about it, is that to figure out how you're going to actually
mhm.
figure it out on your own. I think that's quite something.
I just
But
want to add one
Shubha, you,
thing.
you you raised an interesting point. I'll get back to you.
Sure.
But you also raised something like where does AI fit sort of in the kind of like user journey, kind of mapping and all that? I haven't really given much thought to it, but now that you're in product, maybe you wanna make your point and then maybe talk a little bit about that as well.
I think where it fits and it doesn't fit. It depends how you look at it, because you have a vision about your product. You know exactly what you are trying to build. I think when AI can help, or where AI is actually is helping me, is producing a bunch of outputs that are needed for leadership, like slides and stuff like that, but not the product itself, or the product itself is like, yeah, we are doing it. Of course, it can help brainstorm, uh, uh, but not really on the, like to create the product itself, or at least not for me. um that like summarizing content for stuff or reports or stuff, that's called more like to to help me with my not so sexy part of my job, which is a bunch of stuff outside of building the product. That's at least how I'm using it. But I don't know, Cheesy, what's your take on it?
So, I'm going to bring it to continuous delivery just a little bit.
Okay.
So just because Arar said at the beginning, maybe we're not continuous delivery anymore, but I kind of disagree with one thing that you said, Chava, which is where you said the product owner knows what they want, they know their roadmap. But what I think is happening with AI is the actual cost to build the software has gone down dramatically. And it really, for the first time, whenever we think about, and we can go back to many of the episodes that we've had here so far, a lot of the challenges that we have had with continuous delivery and the experimentation that we've talked about was getting quality software built rapidly, right? and that's no longer a barrier. So I think product owners, in my vision of where this is going, is product owners should never know what they want. They should not have that roadmap. They should maybe know what outcomes that they want. And now we can seriously ideate. We can seriously put lots of options out there because the cost to change it is close to zero, and it's approaching zero now. And
Yeah,
so I think that is where I see it. And so whenever you were talking earlier about building story maps and things like that, in my mind, I was thinking by the time you got your story map right, I've put 7 versions of the app out and I've got feedback from users, because that's where I see it. I see it, get it fast, get it in front of users, learn from it, orchestrate it, learn, and continue to ideate and iterate.
fair. I'm not going to go into the what I meant, but yeah, we are the same page, cheesy. How about
Mhm,
that? Let's
mhm,
just go there.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think I do think there's some value in sort of like mapping out user journeys and all that, but I totally get the sentiment that the cost of software development is falling rapidly, and the bottleneck is knowing what to build rather than
mhm,
how to build it. So let's move on. Let's continuing on the spec-driven thing. So, Cheesy, I know you released a product
yeah,
called Stride.
mhm,
So, what gap did you see in your workflow
mhm,
that you were like, I need this? Like, what was the pain
mhm.
point that made you sort of like go this direction?
So it wasn't necessarily my workflow, it was a workflow at my client, okay, and, at my last client, I should say. Um, we were introducing, AI-driven development, and we started running into a lot of challenges. We ran into challenges around having requirements because we were trying to follow a traditional, more Scrum type approach. And the developers were chewing through the requirements at a much, much faster pace than what the product folks could ever dream of producing requirements in the current form. We were running into a lot of other challenges. We were running into challenges, for example, whenever you produce code that rapidly, then source code management and code review and things like that become a little bit of a bottleneck, and so, and of course, at the client, we also ran into some testing bottlenecks, largely because uh, they still wanted testers to look at everything, even though testers actually kind of stopped finding stuff or it became a lot, rare. So that final issue, their testing's kind of solved itself because they've now moved testers largely out of the testing field position, and that's been good. But the other issues were real. And so what I did is I spent the 2 weeks over the holidays really trying to explore how can I solve some of these problems. And the problem around requirements was one that I spent a lot of time thinking about. And I spent a lot of time talking to different agents around, hey, what type of information would you like to see, Mr. Agent? Claude, Gemini, what type of information would you like to see in order to help you implement something? And then I started asking the questions like, whenever I was asking you to do planning, what was the details behind it? You're giving me bullets, these different various bullets. Well, what was the detail you were going through? What was the process you as an agent were going through in order to kind of come up with those bullets? And what was that context? And what would be lost if I asked you 3 weeks from now to pick it up again? What would you have to go back and kind of reclaim? And we came up with a lot of information, that information, like, the basic stuff, like, description and that type of thing. But there's a lot of other information that we started coming up with, like why, what, where, what's the complexity, even around it. It will determine early on. Most agents will what files it believes it's going to change. What are the technology requirements? What's the verification steps? In other words, what types of steps and tests are you going to build to actually ensure that this thing will work or not? And so what I started to do is I started to build a requirements system in the guise of a Kanban board that can capture all of this data. And I started also thinking about the whole merge conflict and things like that. And so I built into it the ability for it to capture what files it believes it's going to change. And then as we go and we start to assign the work out to multiple agents, whether it be multiple developers on the team, or even one developer running multiple agents at the same time. It can be smart around how it selects what things to work on and assign to developers so that we minimize that conflict. So, for example, let's say Chaba's agent's running and he's modifying, the foobar file, and Zarar, your agent requests, the next task. So I'm ready to work on the next task, and it will not give you a task where it's forecasted that it's going to change the foobar file just because it eliminates conflicts. There's other things that I baked into it, like, for example, matching tasks to the capabilities of the agent, because we know different agents are strong in different ways. And so that was kind of it. And then I wanted to build a really world class onboarding process. So I kind of built that out as well, where it will literally work with the agent, and depending on the agent, if you're Claude Code, for example, it'll install some Claude skills that help and build out the workflow. If you're using Copilot, for example, it will create, the Copilot configuration. If you're using Windsurf, if you're using Cursor, whatever, it'll set up that to and work. And so yeah. The other thing is that you can specify hooks that it will execute at different points in the workflow. So it's just a way to kind of have during the planning to capture a huge amount of information and data, to let a human review that data, let the human specify things that happen during the workflow. And if they want to, review the work at the end. But if they don't want to, it's just going to commit, push, and continue on and just
Right.
burn
Okay.
through the task. So that's in a nutshell what it
There's
is.
a lot there to unpack, Cheesy. I don't think we're going to
There
unpack
is.
all of it at
Yes.
all. But
Yes.
listener, you can check it out on stridelikeaboss.com.
That's right.
I've been using Yegi's beads system for a while.
Mhm.
I've had some decent results with that as
Mhm.
well, but this sounds like a little bit more. It's definitely more user friendly than it is
Mhm.
than Yegi's system. So do check it out. Chaba, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I want to.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm going to just check it out. Didn't have a chance to cheese yet. But one question when it comes to
Mhm.
continuous delivery is: did you bake in any kind of deployment or any kind of like putting this into like AWS or Azure or something like that? So did you think about that aspect to take your application and then do the continuous delivery pretty much underneath?
So it doesn't do that. Basically, its goal is to kind of manage work with multiple agents, and so
Got it.
uh, the way I have mine set up right now is that when it gets to the end of a task, it pushes it to Git, and then I've got
Yeah.
GitHub Actions that actually.
I'm not, I'm just like as I said earlier, like everybody has their own comfort levels right now. I'm just not at the push stage right now, just because pushing to main goes to prod for me. And
It does for me.
like,
Well, it doesn't go to prod for me, but you're okay, Zorar, because every single task in this system, there's a checkbox that you could say it needs review. And what happens is a task where you say it needs review, whenever it gets to that endpoint, it pauses.
yeah,
And you can go in and you can review it. And you can even say, no, this wasn't right. In which case it takes it back and it works it, or you can reject it outright and it rolls everything back. And so
yeah, fair enough,
it's
fair
got
enough.
these hooks so that humans can
Mhm,
interject themselves at many different points in the workflow.
mhm.
So and
Let's.
so it's up to you how much
I
you
think
do.
I think we just got to test it out a little bit more and see
Mhm.
and give you some feedback on our workflow with it.
Yep.
Let's move to the next kind of next block here, and it's sort of like, does language matter? And Cheesy, I know you wrote about this as well, and I read the paper that you posted when it came out earlier in the summer, and I love the fact that Elixir was number one. I think what we're talking about here is um, what languages are are the least error prone or most successful in generating AI code. So if you give a problem to an agent and you ask it to do something in Java, in Elixir, in
Mhm.
whatever, what language produced the most correct result?
Yep.
Um, and Elixir was like, if not number one, number one. I think in terms of correctness, and a lot
It
of the
was number
other
one.
languages were
Yep.
sort of in the middle of the pack type deal. Cheesy, and then you wrote a post about like, does language matter? Like Chaba and I will get our reaction, but quickly, what were your sort of conclusions on that question?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. By the way, what Sarar was mentioning was the auto code bench that was published by a company, and where they looked at, many languages across many LLMs. So, and what we saw with this was that there is a huge, variance of accuracy, and it really drives down the language. And I kind of coupled that with a paper or an article that IEEE wrote, where they talked a little bit about how they thought languages were becoming less important, and they could see a future where, AI will basically compile down to maybe an intermediate type uh, language, if you will, and then the runtime will compile it, to runtime. And so there's a lot of theories around this, but my whole idea, what I was talking about, or where I was going with the article was, historically companies have selected languages based on, availability of developers, based on, what internal knowledge, skill sets that they have, what internal code bases exist and interoperability with things like that. But as developers are writing less and less and less of the code, does it matter which language we select? I give a couple of examples in there, which are, for example, let's say that you're on the JVM and you use Java. What is wrong with an agent selecting Kotlin to implement something? It compiles to the JVM. Why wouldn't it do that? Or even more around service-oriented architectures where maybe we're using RESTful JSON calls. Why wouldn't it use Elixir, in an environment or whatever? Whenever we try to think about what's the strongest languages, what's the right place. So the whole idea here is that doesn't really matter anymore, or are we going to get to a place where we select the language that is the best for AI, or we let AI select the language over time? So that was kind of the thoughts that I was pondering in the post.
Um, yeah, I think, Chaba, you want to have a reaction to that? Does language matter? Because I have some thoughts adjacent to languages, but your
So
reaction.
very very brief reaction. I agree with Cheesy here, and on largely the one question I still have is that we still want developers or engineers, whatever you want to call them, to have an understanding of that language, because you still want some level of understanding or potentially review or potentially. So I like when you say it doesn't matter, you cannot just say that you don't have to understand this language at all, right? But on the other hand, and this is where I kind of almost contradict myself. If you code in one language, you code it almost in any language, right? How you code print in a given language, the
Mhm.
syntax is almost irrelevant. So I can see both, like both sides of that argument.
Mhm.
I myself wrote code in a language that I never coded before using AI, and wrote super fast,
Mhm.
fully functional, fully tested code. So I can attest to the fact that you understand the architecture, you understand how these things work on a
Mhm.
in a runtime or whatever environment. So um,
So
yeah, we'll see, Cheesy.
I'm of the belief that language, sort of the syntax, doesn't matter. But I think when you pick a language, you also make certain choices regarding architecture and deployments and fault tolerance and scalability, which are sort of inherently tied to the language. And the best example that I can come up with, sort of on short notice, or three examples I can come up with. One is if you pick Java or Kotlin, you're sort of picking the JVM,
Mhm.
right? And you have to production tune it. You've made a decision that you're going to manage state. Those are architectural, long-term sort of decisions you have made when you pick a language. So it's not a question of like just picking a language. You're also making sort of secondary decision, or the language pick makes secondary decisions for you. Another example, Elixir. Or if you pick Elixir, you're kind of going with Erlang and the Beam, right?
Mhm.
So with that, you're prioritizing fault tolerance. You're not going to manage state anymore.
Mhm.
It has implications. So even though
Mhm.
the syntax doesn't necessarily matter, and you can go on and on with like if you pick C sharp, you go to the Microsoft suite, like so there are certain sort of deployment and kind of long-term implications of picking a language.
Mhm.
But I do agree with Cheesy that I think people will maybe start picking language based on AI. But I think we're still a while away from that because it has underlying implications that are not as simple as picking syntax.
Yep. I mean, if you look at my history, and maybe both of you have had the same, when I first started using, AI to write code, I wanted to look at every single change. I wanted to look at every single line of code, and I would spend, probably as much time reviewing and looking at the code as I did a lot having, the agent actually produce the code. But over time, as I became more and more confident with it, and I realized that, in 90+% of the time, I would never ever make a change. I did less and less of that, and over time, the amount of time that I spent looking became less, and instead, what I tried to do is put good controls in place to check or to grab, to identify things. For example, really good static code analysis, very thorough, good security checks, good, make sure that we're writing, have a lot of tests for everything. And once I had those in place, I didn't feel the need to look at the majority of the code. Only if I was doing something that I felt was maybe a little tricky would I care about, but the majority of the time I didn't. And I think if we look at, the last 6 months, those of us, the three of us, have just seen huge change in what these LLMs can do. And I think 2026, we're going to see even more change. And so I think over time, by the end of this year, maybe we are starting to pick the language that the agent can work with the best for that purpose. Or maybe we let the agent pick the.
I would like, sorry, I just want to add one thing which Zara mentioned, and I think this is you just click something. I think the target deployment and the cost of running that is going to be a factor.
Mhm.
Because I could deploy almost the same functionality. Most of the stuff could be expressed in almost any language, but most of the business applications, if I make these choices, and depending on running in different cloud providers, would have cost implications for depending on my architecture, again, the scalability and so on. So I think that cost and that alone might dictate, or not might dictate, but might inform that choice of what language am I going to pick.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we, looking ahead in the future, it's so hard to do. But if we just see the same change we saw between 4.5 Sonnet and 4.7 Opus, if we see a step change like that in 2026,
Mhm.
I think that's a game changer, right? Like now, I totally get it that you're not going to need as much review. I mean, right now we're with Tidewave. I know Tidewave is limited to certain frameworks and languages, and it's not available everywhere. But just having the runtime of the application as context,
Mhm.
uh, something which is a game changer. And guess what? Most people don't even know about that, right?
Yep.
Like 99% of people who are doing AI development have no idea about Tidewave and how it works.
Mhm.
So I think if you see like an innovation like that go a little forward, another kind of frontier model take the same leap, I'm nobody to say what the future looks like here, man. It's
Mhm.
I can. So I am totally not gonna rule out rule out the fact that we look at the AI code, the test pass, and you push. Like that's where it's headed.
Mhm.
Um, so let's switch and a couple more topics. We're at 28 minutes. Product management and structure. So we promised a little product management talk at the start. And Chava, I know you proposed this segment. Lay it out for us what your thesis is here.
I think what Cheesy did, and actually I want to try out his framework.
Stride like a boss, Doc.
Yeah,
Ride like a boss, baby.
I wanna talk to Cheesy after this for sure. So I think there is an element in the right now, and we're moving towards that. And in a way, I'm saying this with heavy heart because I am deep down. I'm a coder. I grew up with this, but whether I want to put my hand in the sand or accept it or not, coding and product management and product building is going to start like kind of come together in the sense that soon less and less technological knowledge will be needed, And we are already seeing examples, and we saw some negative examples and got some publicity when these product managers just vibe code together something, and of course it's horrible, and then it's attacked, and then you guys probably know those stories, right? But regardless, that's the direction, in my opinion. And whether we can completely get away with developers, I don't think so. I think you will still need someone on the team who understands how this thing runs, like down to the metal, down to bare bones, and understand the architecture, understand all these things. But less and less of these people will be needed, and more to this rapid prototyping, churning out very quick feedback loops, which you will be less and less needed to have like development teams. And man, this is like, on one hand, I'm kind of like, boy, where are we heading? On the other hand,
It's exciting.
yeah, exactly. So both sides is kind of scary and exciting and at the same time.
Yeah. You're on mute. You're muted. So since you're muted, I'll start.
Right. Yeah, go ahead, Cheesy. Go ahead.
I mean, the thing that everybody agrees on is that the old way of having a product owner work with lots of stakeholders to kind of manage a backlog and try to deliver just in time, that has to go out the window, because there's no way that those mechanisms can keep up with the pace or the speed with which the agents are able to produce things. So I think it's going to be very, very different in that I can envision, in what have seen happening now with Stride a little bit, is where a product owner will work with a tech lead, and they'll specify something and spew out 100 tasks that get shoved into a kind of a backlog, and they need to quickly go through it, look at it, feel good about it, but know that it's probably only 80% right, and that's okay, because that 80% right's going to churn out and come out very quickly. And then it's really about, those constant micro adjustments. And once it comes out, fix it, tweak it, get something in front of the users as quickly as you possibly can, pull that back, learn from that. So I think it's going to be, you know, the whole adage that we're going to shoot for the general idea, and we're going to adjust into what's right, and then we're
Yeah.
going to try to learn as rapidly as we can,
B-
because I
b-
think trying to create a backlog that's large enough and completely accurate that a lot of agents are going to be able to do it, it's not going to happen. It can never happen.
Basically, I mean, you mentioned earlier that development cost has gone down. I think of it more as iteration cost has gone down, which is the same as that, but I think it puts a different flavor to it. Is that you don't need to strive for perfection at all, because the cost of change is so low. MVPs are now built in like hours, right? I mean, I'm not joking. The other day I had to build like a whole analytics system. I ate dinner at 6. By 10 o'clock, I shipped out like 4 major features about data analytics. And then like people give me feedback by the next day, and I tweaked it. So that's what the iterate. So if you're a product manager, I think you should be excited, because you have a chance to get way better customer feedback now. Because you can literally just look at your ticket queue or whatever it is at your workplace, whatever the pain point is, you could implement that in a day and get feedback on it. But and you don't necessarily need to know development or anything like that. You can still stay almost entirely in the product management realm and be immensely successful without knowing a lick of coding, really. But for software engineers, I think it's exciting for them, because a door has opened up for them as well, because they have actually more time now to dedicate to the product side of things, because they have because so much time is freed up on the development side, that they can say, oh, let me go and see what the customer is looking for here, instead of just being like a doer. You're actually, it's opened a thinking door for you, because what you used to do takes such less little time. And as a developer, you're always gonna, you're always 100% of the time gonna know more about the app than the PM. Like always, that's a fact of life, right? And you got to take advantage of that. So for a developer, I feel it's way more exciting. I do have one more topic I want to get both your opinions on before we close.
Okay.
And it's the value of core software engineering principles. I'm talking like, DRY, solid, single responsibility principle. modular architecture, dependency management, all these kind of things. Chaba, I'll start with you. Do you use as things get as we progress, as cycle time gets shorter, feedback loops get shorter, code gets more written by AIs? Has the value of these sort of concepts and ideas, how important is it now for developers to know this? Has that shifted downward, or has it gotten more important?
I'm going to say that what, based on my experience, a convoluted code is confuses AI as well. So if a code is not clean, AI gets tripped on it, especially if you shift stuff into configuration, like certain business logic in different. So what I'm trying to say is that to make our helpers' job easy and clean and fast, I think these principles are sound. But I think what's happening today is a much easier to maintain these principles and bake these principles in than it was before. So I think they are equally important, but the cost of this. So there's no excuse anymore. This is what I'm trying to say. If you are a developer, no excuse to refactor anymore. And add duplicate code. I'm sorry, but that's just my position on this. So yes, they are important in the short term. Sorry, short.
A lot of these design principles that you mentioned, Zohar, are for object-oriented programming languages. You mentioned solid design principles and things like that. And so I think no matter what language you're using, good design is important. And the truth is that like Chaba said, there's no excuse not to have it. And to be quite honest, you don't need to do it either. In other words, the agent will do it. So at my client, we specified we want to follow, in the Java code, we specified I want to follow the solid design principles. And what we found was that early on, if we're going into some legacy code, maybe some domestic code, there are a couple of extra smaller steps that we want to take early on as we're making some of those changes. But that once it gets factored well, AI has a much easier task ahead of itself. So it makes things more accurate. It allows you to go faster.
Yeah, I think I agree with both those points. I think it's I would say it's increased because you have so much code, and code needs organization. I don't think you can make the assumption yet, at least, that you don't need to look at the code. When there's a production defect at some point, you will have to go in there, and you cannot just vibe code your way out of a production defect. We're not there yet. I don't know if we'll.
I
ever,
do.
Huh?
I do.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not. I can't do that because I need to know that there is a fix for this. Right? Like I need to know that, and for me to confirm that there is a fix for this, I think I need to understand the code. It's a very slippery slope, a dangerous cliff, especially if you have an app where people's kind of lives depend on it. Like their businesses depend on it. Like it's too big of a risk for me to go there. That's why I think you need to understand the code. And I'll go back to if you want to understand the code yourself, which I think Chaba is on the same wavelength as me on that one. Cheesy, I'm not sure. Okay, but I think if we want to understand the code, I think the value of design principles and some of these ideas has gone up. Okay, we're at 38 minutes. Guys, this is like 2 podcasts in 3 weeks. I think we're on a roll here. I'm not going to make any more promises, but we may be back sooner than you think.
That's
Listener,
right.
follow us on LinkedIn, or whatever. I think we have a LinkedIn group somewhere. You search for Continuous Delivery Podcast, or follow Cheesy on LinkedIn and Chaba on LinkedIn, and myself as well if you want. What am I doing? Why am I promoting ourselves here? Okay. Listener, we'll see you again soon enough, and have a nice evening. Goodbye.